Hi, this is a video tutorial for the content page in Unit 2, Activity 1. And just kind of as an overview, Unit 2 is going to focus on story elements. So we will be looking at short stories, we'll eventually be looking at movies, anything that tells a story. We'll kind of look at the different elements that make it up. And to start with, we're going to look at archetypes and genres in storytelling. And so the first bit is going to focus on archetypes. And archetypes are essentially characters or events in stories that you've seen over and over and over again. And so if we take a look here, it says, when you're watching a movie or reading a novel for the first time, have you ever thought, I know this character. I've seen a character exactly like this before. Or have you ever thought, I know what's going to happen next in this story. I've seen this happen before, even if you've never seen the movie or read the book before. Well, that's because we're kind of tapping into archetypes. Stories use the same types of characters and the same events over and over again. And so I'd like you to take a look at this video, which I think explains pretty well what an archetype is. And then take a look at two different lists here. We've got character archetypes and plot archetypes. And these are certainly not all of the different character archetypes and all of the different plot archetypes that you can see in stories, but it's a pretty common list. So for example, when you're watching a movie or reading a book, there is usually a traditional hero character, aka the good guy. That's benevolent and honest and honorable and kind of always does the right thing. There's often a villain character whose role is to kind of upset the hero and try to bring the hero down. You often see a mentor or mother figure character that kind of helps or protects the main hero of the story. We often have sidekick characters. We often have innocent characters that are very sort of innocent, and they're always good, and they always believe that there'll be a happy ending, and no matter what happens, they always tend to have a positive outlook. Okay, a good example of that. You've got examples for all of these, but a good example of the innocent would be someone like Forrest Gump in the movie Forrest Gump. And then you've got risk takers. You often have characters in stories that take unnecessary risks, particularly in like thriller or horror movies and stories. They seemingly make decisions that are kind of too risky, and we probably wouldn't make them in real life. But they're thrill seekers, and they're willing to put their money or their emotions or even their health on the line to take a risk and to try something challenging. Okay? So this is just an example of 7 characters that you can come across kind of over and over again in stories. In terms of plot, or in terms of events that we see over and over again, you can look at overcoming the monster. That's a common storytelling plot. If you look at the old story Beowulf or Dracula or King Kong, you have this repetitive pattern of the characters in the story having to overcome a monster. And the monster doesn't necessarily have to be a mythical creature like a vampire or King Kong. It could be a human, like if you're trying to, like a serial killer, or a monster can come in human form, right? You have rags to riches stories. And it doesn't always, usually rags to riches, when we think of that, we think of someone that starts off poor and becomes rich. And that is a good example. But it doesn't have to just be about money. It can be anyone that's sort of down and out and not doing very well in life, and then they make sort of a dramatic comeback, and they end up being a great success. So that's sort of a rags to riches sort of plot structure. Cinderella would be a good example of that. Right, Aladdin would be a good example of that in sort of movie form. The Quest. Okay, this we see a lot of too, where a hero or a character has to go on a long journey in order to accomplish something important. Right? If you think of Lord of the Rings or Wizard of Oz or Harry Potter, all examples of stories where characters had to go on long quests. You have a plot archetype that we can just call the comedy, where you have usually mistaken identities or misunderstandings that lead to confusion and lead to chaos. Which is used to create humor and laughter, right? And then you have the tragedy, which is a story that certainly doesn't have a happy ending, where the heroes, end up, dying in the end, or not succeeding in their task. So, classic example of the tragedy, of course, is Romeo and Juliet. And then, lastly, for plot archetypes, we have a story archetype called Rebirth. Rebirth, where the hero, something happens to the hero. Maybe he has to overcome a sickness, or maybe he has to overcome something traumatic that's happened in his life, and he or she has to have a rebirth and a sort of a coming out, and they're able to get their life back on track and are able to change themselves and become a better person. Again, the idea of being reborn. Of course, the biblical resurrection of Jesus is sort of the classic example of a rebirth story. But we can see it in Beauty and the Beast or A Christmas Carol. We can see it in all sorts of stories. So these, again, are just plot archetypes that we can see over and over again. To give you an example of a specific plot archetype, we have the quest. So taking this plot archetype, the quest, and showing how it works in the movie The Matrix. And so take a look at this video. I believe it's a producer of The Matrix that explains the plot archetype and how it works throughout the movie. And ask yourself, as you're listening to him explain the Matrix plot, ask yourself, how many stories have you seen, whether they were written or whether they were a movie? How many stories have you seen that follow that exact same quest sort of outline? And then when we continue on here, you'll see genre, which is going to be our second topic for this activity. And so what we're talking about with genre is when you listen to music, or when you watch movies, or when you read short stories and novels, they fit into different types or categories, which we call genre. And so you've got a definition of genre right here explaining where it comes from. And then we have a list of 11 modern genres that we can see used in movies and in stories today. And so I'd like you to take a look at these 11. Again, we can go beyond 11. As you'll find, as we talk about down here, it's gotten to the point with genre where the genres have started to blend, and where we can break them down into subgenres. We have so many different stories that now we can, really have a very wide and broad look at different types of genres. But this is 11 classic genres that you can still see in modern stories today, and I'd like you to be aware of these 11. Okay. And then we've got a video here that tries to explain genre as well. And so take a look, and it's from Oregon State University, and a professor tries to explain how genre works today. And that's it. If you're comfortable with archetypes and genre, you know the content that I want you to know in this activity.